Hello, everyone. Jay Coder here again, and I'm here to do another stream with you all. And today we're going to be talking about classes in Kotlin. We're going to be doing a little code lab that will show us an example of how we can use classes and their objects instances. And this is important for object-oriented programming, which is Kotlin is a object-oriented programming language, which is used in Android development. So, if you want to learn more about Android development and level up from the basics, you're gonna have to learn about classes and how they work. And so, in this tutorial, we're gonna be going over that today. And I hope that you guys will be able to learn something here, and let's get started. All right, so it's we're going to be going over this code lab here, classes and object instances in Kotlin. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and copy this and put it in the chat so that everyone can be able to reference it later. And also, let me go ahead and mute this music here so that you guys can hear me and stuff. All right. So I posted the collab in the chat, and so this is what we're going to start out with is this collab here. So let's get started here. Classes and object instances in Kotlin. Number one, before you begin, for the code labs in the pathway, you will be building a dice roller Android app. When the user rolls the dice, a random result will be generated. The result takes into account the number of sides of the dice. For example, only values from 1 to 6 can be rolled from a 6-sided dice. This is what the final app will look like. So it will take us a few code labs to reach this solution, but today we're going to be focusing mostly on your first examples of classes and objects in Android. So to help you focus on the new programming concepts for this app, you will use the browser-based Kotlin programming tool to create core app functionality. The program will output your results to the console. Later, you will implement the user interface in Android Studio. In this first code lab, you will create a Kotlin program that stimulates rolling dice and outputs a random number just like a dice would. Prerequisites: how to open and edit and run code in this developerandroid.com training Kotlin Playground. Create and run a Kotlin program that uses variables, functions, and prints a result to the console. Format numbers within text using a string template with the $, and then you have this bracket here, and variable, and then notation, the curly bracket here. And what you'll learn: how to programmatically generate random numbers to simulate dice rolls, how to structure your code by creating a dice class with a variable and a method, how to create an object instance of a class, modify its variables, and call its methods, and what you'll build: a Kotlin program in the browser-based Kotlin programming tool that can perform a random dice roll, a computer with an internet connection. Alright, so today it wants us to do our development inside the web-based Kotlin Playground. And so we're not going to be working in Android Studio today. So this is a nice tool to work with if you have not been introduced to it before. It's worth knowing about if you are an Android developer. And so I'm going to go ahead and post this link into the chat so that you can also conveniently be able to go there, because that's what we're going to be coding in on this code lab. And I'll also post that in the description for later as well, which I have done. So I'm going to say the the above link is the Kotlin Playground, and it's used for this lab. Yeah, I was typing in the chat, so if you don't see that screen right now, but that's okay. I'm just typing something in the chat right now, and I finished. Let me go ahead and go back to the lesson here, and also, and all right, yeah, let's go ahead and go on to roll random numbers. Oh yeah, I wanted to say that this is a pretty good thing to learn right now about how to produce random numbers, because in applications you'll often need random occurrences, or need to access random numbers for one way or another. And like it's going to say, it's going to be popular for game development, as well as you'll need to be able to have random numbers occur in random instances. So, all right, so two, roll random numbers. Games often have a random element to them. Could learn a random you could earn a random prize or advance a random number of steps on the game board. In your everyday life, you can use random numbers and letters to generate safer passwords. Instead of rolling actual dice, you can write a program that simulates rolling dice for you. Each time you roll the dice, the outcome can be used any num can be any number within the range of possible values. Fortunately, you don't have to build your own random number generator for such a program. Most programming languages, including Kotlin, way for you have a built-in way for you to generate random numbers. In this task, you will use the Kotlin code to generate a random number. So, yeah, most programming languages will have it built in. So let's see how they want us to do it. So it says set up your starter code in your browser, open the website, and delete all the existing code in the code editor. So I have it in this other tab here. And so the existing code is the hello world, it looks like. And so when we play that, it will give the output right here. So for our purposes, we don't need this right now. So I'm going to go ahead and delete that. And then what doesn't want? So use the random function. To roll a dice, you need a way to represent all the valid dice roll values. For a regular six-sided dice, the acceptable dice rolls are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Previously, you learned that there are types of data like int for integer, numbers, and strings for text. Int range is another data type, and it represents a range of integer numbers from the starting point to an endpoint. Int range is a suitable data type for representing the possible values a dice roll can produce. 1. Inside your main function, define a variable as a val called dice range. Assign it to an int range from 1 to 6, representing the range of integer numbers that a six-sided dice can roll. So inside our main function, we're going to declare this variable dice range. So this is going to be the range of the dice between 1, well, including 1 to 6. And you can tell that 1.6 is a Kotlin range because it has a start number, 2 dots, followed by an ending number, no spaces in between. Other examples of integer ranges are 2.5 for the numbers 2 through 5, and 100.200 for the numbers 100 through 200. And tip, notice that it does not say int range in this definition. In the same way, you did not have to specify int or string when creating a variable for an integer or string. Most of the time, the system can figure out what data type you intend. For example, the system interprets this val dice range equals 1.6 as this val dice range, then colon, int range equals 1.6. So essentially this is the equivalent of this, and you don't have to implicitly say that it's an int range. You can just go ahead and omit that, and this is the type, and this is the variable name. So you don't have to put the type here because it will automatically detect and know what type you're using. Similar to how print ln tells the system to print the given text, you can use a function called random to generate and return a random number for you for a given range. As before, you can store the result in a variable. 2. Inside main, define a variable as val called random number. 3. Make random number have the value of the result, calling random on the dice range as shown below. So, alright, so now you can assign a second variable to dicerange.random, which will produce the random number for us. So it wants us to list this below this line. And so here we start out with this guy dice range that will be arranged from 1 to 6. And then our actual random number will be dice range dot random, which will output a random that will be 1 through 6. And to get a random number, you only need these 2 lines of code in Kotlin, and then you can have a random number generator, which is actually pretty amazing. And so notice that you are calling random on dice range using a period or dot between the variable and the function call. You can read this as generating random numbers from dice range. The result is then stored in the random number variable. To see your randomly generated number using the string formatting notation, also called a string template, and this was what they mean a string template. You have the $, curly bracket, random number, curly bracket to print it as shown below. So what they want us to do is, after we call those 2 lines, we're going to print out our random number below. So let's go ahead and do that. And the beauty of it is anyone can go to this website and quickly put these 2 lines of code in here and be able to know how to program a random number generator in Kotlin, which is pretty cool. So we're going to hit play, and then, so, all right, boom. Our random number is 3 this time. Let's play it again, and then boom, our random number is 6. Let's do it again. Boom, our random number is 1. So this is essentially what you need to display the random number. And remember, this variable is being set by this code here, which will produce the random number. And then we are displaying this text down here, random number. And then inside the text, we're doing a template, a string template, which when you call this $sign and curly bracket, you can put the variable straight in there between the curly brackets to display within the string. So you have the string start and the string end with these quotations. And then if you want to put the variable straight in to a string with quotations, you can do a string template like this. Normally, this you could not put this directly within the quotations. Normally, like in other languages or older versions, you would have to display the this variable outside. Like you would have to do something like plus random number, which will be the equivalent of that code that we just did. So it's going to be that's the equivalent, but nowadays you can use the string template. So all right, let's continue. Your finished code should look like this. So we have the fun main, and then the val, which the code I just showed you. And we already ran it several times, and we got different random numbers. And then tips about ranges. Ranges can be between any integer. The following are valid ranges: 3, 46. And you see all these different ranges. They can even be negative ranges as well. And you can call functions directly on a range. For example, 1.6.random. So wow. So this syntax will give you the random number between 1 and 6, which is an even more shorthanded version of the code that we just did. So, all right. So 3, create a dice class. When you roll dice, they are real objects in your hands. While the code you just wrote works perfectly fine, it's hard to imagine that it's about actual dice. Organizing a program to be more like the things it represents makes it easier to understand. So it would be cool to have programmatic dice that you can roll. All dice work essentially the same. They have the same properties such as sides, and they have the same behavior such as that they can be rolled. In Kotlin, you can create a programmatic blueprint of a dice that says that dice has sides and can roll a random number. This blueprint is called a class. From that class, you can then create actual dice objects called object instances. For example, you can create a 12-sided dice or a 4-sided dice. Tip: a class is similar to how an architect's blueprint plans are not the house. They are the instructions of how to build the house. The house is the actual thing or object instance created according to the blueprint. So that's an interesting way that they describe a class. They describe a class as a blueprint, and the object instance is the actual thing that the blueprint plans are talking about. Notice, organizing everything about dice into a class is called encapsulation. So this is a very important computer science term and object-oriented term that you should memorize the definition for, and you may very well be asked this in an interview, and it's a good thing to know for Android development in general. Encapsulation is a big fancy word, but all it means is that you can enclose functionality that is logically related into a single place. Define a dice class. In the following steps, you will define a new class called dice to represent a rollable dice. 1. To start afresh, clear out the code in the main function so that you end up with the code as shown below. Function main. To number 2, below this main function, add a blank line, then add code to create the dice class as shown below. Start with the keyword class, followed by the name of the class, followed by an opening and closing curly brace. Leave space in between the curly braces to put your code of the class. So it wants us to go ahead and start this class here, and we're going to go ahead and put this under the main function. So if this is your first time making a class, a good practice is to have each class in its own file. But for this example, this class is going to be under the main. Usually you don't really put a class within a function. However, you can put functions within a class. But this function, we're going to put the class outside of it, which we're going to put it right here, class dice. And says, no, similar to using the fun keyword in Kotlin to create a new function, use the class keyword to create a new class. You can choose any name of a class, but it is helpful if the name indicates what the class represents. By convention, the class name is written in upper camel case, also called Pascal casing. For example, car, parking meter, and customer record are all valid class names, and you can guess at what they represent. Inside a class function, you can specify one or more properties for the class using variables. Real dice can have a number of sides, a color, or weight. In this task, you'll focus on the property of number of sides of the dice. 3. Inside the dice class, add a var called sides for the number of sides your dice will have. Set size to 6. So the first variable we're going to have in our class is the number of sides of our dice. So we're going to have a 6-sided dice. So let's go ahead and put this here inside our dice class. And that's it. You now have a very simple class representing dice. So, all right. Create an instance of the dice class. So, this is going to be the actual thing that the blueprint is instructing us to build. So, we're going to create an instance of this class. With this dice class, you have a blueprint of what a dice is. To have an actual dice in your program, you need to create a dice object instance. And if you needed to have 3 dice, you would create 3 object instances. So let's say, we're playing a game, we need 3 dice. So we need, um, like you can name these dice different names, such as my first dice, second dice, third dice, and it's gonna all be based off this dice class, which they're saying is the blueprint. To create an object instance of dice, the main function create a val called my first dice and initialize it as an instance of the dice class. Notice the parentheses after the class name, which denote that you are creating a new object instance from the class. So, all right. So it says in the function main, it wants us to go ahead and create this new class. So in Kotlin, this is how you would initiate a class function. How you would declare and initiate a class function. So let me go ahead and comment this out. Actually, they don't have the commenting shortcut here, but I can do this manually. And so it wants us to go ahead and create my first dice here, which is instantiated with the dice class, which it references here. So if this was deleted or not here, then this would do an error because it will not know what dice is. Since we declared the dice class right here, it knows what what this means. So notice that we place this in the main function. So in the main function, that's where the execution of the program is. Like if you down here, outside of main, we're declaring a class, but inside of main, we want to be able to use the class in the program. This is how you do it. Initiate it right here, inside the program execution. And so let's go back. And now that you have my first dice, my first dice object, a thing made from the blueprint, you can access the properties. The only property of dice is its sides. You access a property called the dot notation. So you access a property using the dot notation. So to access the size property of the my first dice, you call my first dice dot sides, which is pronounced my first dice dot sides. To number 2, below the declaration of my first dice, add a print line statement to output the number of sides of my first dice. So how many sides do we have? We're going to go ahead and print that here. And so the next thing they want us to do is print that out here. So we're going to print out this instance of a class, and inside this class there's a thing called sides. So we're going to do my first dice dot sides to access this variable inside the class. So I know it's obvious of what this is going to print out. How many sides are in our class? It's going to be 6. So it's, displaying the amount of sides in the class. So note, you used the dot notation earlier when calling diceRange.random. Generalized, you can think of the dot notation as saying on something dot perform some action, such as here with my my first dice dot sides. On this instance, it gets the sides property. Your code should look like this. So, yeah, that's what we have. And then when you run your program, and it should output the number of sides defined in the dice class, which is 6. You have a dice class and an actual dice. My first dice was 6 sides. Let's make the dice roll. Alright, so make the dice roll. You previously used a function to perform the action of printing cake layers. Rolling dice is also an action that can be implemented as a function. And since all dice can be rolled, you can add a function for it inside the dice class. A function that is defined inside a class is called a method. So a function inside defined inside an actual class is called a method. Sometimes you hear methods and functions used interchangeably, but here from the official source is saying a method a function defined inside a class is actually called a method. So that's the difference between functions and methods, at least in Kotlin. Number one, in the dice class, below the sides variable, insert a blank line and then create a new function for rolling the dice. Start with the Kotlin keyword fun, followed by the name of the method, followed by parentheses, followed by opening and closing braces. You can leave a blank line in between the curly braces to make room for more code as shown below. Your class should look like this. So they want us to go ahead and define a method inside our function. Inside our class. So we don't have any code inside our function yet, but that's what we're going to add shortly. Note, you can name this method anything you want, but it is helpful to give it a name that indicates what action it performs. The naming convention for functions and methods is to start with a lowercase letter, use camel case, and start with an action verb, if possible. When you roll a 6-sided dice, it produces a random number between 1 and 6. 2. Inside the roll method, create a value random number, assign it to a random number in the 1.6 range. Use the dot notation to call random on the range. So what we're going to do is remember that random number generator that we did before. We're going to add it now to our class. So after generating the random number, print it to the console. You finished roll method should look like the code below. So we're going ahead and put this inside the roll method. Alright. And then, so can anyone guess how we can actually call this method. So what we can do is we can say dice dot roll, and this will call our method. Remember we called the sides? So sides is a variable. So now we're calling a method. And then calling this method will perform the code inside this method, which are these two lines, which it will get a random number, and then we're going to print that to the screen. And so we have, let's go ahead and do that. So I'm going to play unresolved reference roll. Unresolved reference roll. I have it right there. So let's see. So it says, oh, okay. What I did wrong is I named it the class name, which I need the variable name. So you need the variable name, and then that should work, because dice is the class name, not the instance name. The instance of the class name is my first dice. So you actively saw a little mistake there, and we debugged it, and that's how programming will work most of the time, where you'll have to figure out the issue. And so, all right, so 6 and 4. So the 6 comes from this output here, my dice dot sides, which is 6. And then the 4 comes from my first dice dot roll, which they randomly chose 4. So let's play it again. It randomly chose 6. This will always be 6, this one, because it is the number of sides, unless we change the number of sides to something else. Alright, so to actually roll my first dice, in main call the roll method on my first dice. You call a method using the dot notation. So to call the roll method of my first dice, you type my first dice dot roll, which is pronounced my first dice dot roll. My first dice dot roll here, your completed code should look like this. So, alright. So we have our completed code, and we run it. You run your code, you should see the result of a random dice roll below the number of sides. Run your code several times and notice that the number of sides stays the same and the dice roll value changes. Congratulations, you have defined a dice class with a sides variable and a roll function in the main function. You created a new dice object instance, and then you called roll method on it to produce a random number. Alright, so congratulations. That's what we have so far. Alright, so return your dice roll's value. Currently, you are printing out the value of the random number in your roll function, and that works great. But sometimes it's more useful to return the result of a function to whatever called the function. For example, you could assign the result of the roll method to a variable and then move a player by that amount. Let's see how that's done. In main, modify the line that says my first dice start roll, create a val called dice roll, set it equal to the value returned by the roll method. So, okay. So val dice roll, my first dice dot roll. This doesn't do anything yet. Okay, we're gonna assign this function call to a variable. Alright, so it wants us to go here, and then in the main, modify the line that says where we call the roll to assign it to a variable here. So we're going to go ahead and change this to and assign it to a variable. And so, alright, we assign this method to a variable. So the results of this method will be returned unto this dice roll value. However, as you can see right now, our method does not return any result right now. So right now, as the code is, this will not be assigned. This doesn't do anything yet because roll doesn't return anything yet. In order for this code to work as intended, roll has to return something. In previous code labs, you learned that you need to specify a type of input argument to functions. In the same way, you have to specify a data type for data that a function returns. Change the roll function to specify what type of data will be returned. In this case, the random number is an int, so the return type is int. The syntax for specifying the return type is after the name of the function, after the parentheses, add a colon, space, and then int keyword for the return type of the function. The function definition should look like the code below. So, alright, so in our roll method, we're going to have to specify what type of variable the function will return. And in this case, it's going to be an int. So this is the syntax of how to say the return type of a Kotlin function, colon, and then the return type after these parentheses. So we did that, and then it says run this code. You will see an error in the problems view. It says return expression required in a function with a block body. So basically, even though we said what type of the variable will be when it's returned, we don't actually return it. So when we go ahead and run the program, we're gonna get an error. And like they said, a return expression is required in a function with a block body. So that means we're going to have to specify what we're returning there. You change the function definition to return an int, but the system is complaining that your code doesn't actually return an int. Block body or function body refers to the code between the curly braces of a function. You can fix this error by returning a value from a function using a return statement that is at the end of the function body. For enroll, remove the print line statement and replace it with a return statement for a random number. Your roll function should look like the code below. So instead of printing it to the screen, we're going to go ahead and return it. So, so instead of this print line random number, we're going to return random number. All right. So we're going to go ahead and delete that. And so that should be functional where it's going to return the random number into this value. So what does it want us to do now? In main, remove the print statement for the sides dice. Add a statement to print out the value of sides and dice roll in an informative sentence. Use your finish main function. Your finished main function should look similar to the code below. So, alright. So, it wants us to go ahead and print our results in an informative sentence. So, we're going to delete this guy because we're going to print it in the same line, which is printing out the sides. So we're going to print out the sides and the dice roll in the same line here, which is your, and then we call the sides, which will display the sides, and then your blah 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 sided dice rolled. Boom, dice roll. So dice roll is actually this variable which harbors the result of this method called from my first dice.roll. So it will choose a random number, return that random number from this function, return it into this variable, and display it here. So let's go ahead and run that and see how that looks. So we're going to go ahead and run that. And then it says your six-sided dice rolled 3. Let's play it again. Your six-sided dice rolled 4. Let's play it again. Your six-sided dice rolled 3. So, yeah, of course, that's going to be your random number there. And nice, that's what our application is doing so far. Let's go back. Run your code and your output should be like this. Your six-sided dice rolled 4. Here is all your code so far, which this is what we have so far. Alright, so let's go on to the next. Change the number of sides on your dice. Not all dice have 6 sides. Dice come in all shapes and sizes. 4 sides, 8 sides, up to 120 sides. Wow. that is wow. When in your dice class, in your roll method, change the hard-coded 1.6 to use sides instead, so that the range and thus the random number rolled will always be right for the number of sides. So it wants us to change the number of sides, or change the 6 to the number of sides. So instead of hard coding it. So let's go ahead and do that. So what we're gonna do is, instead of just saying 6 here, which if we change this to 7, then this will still be 6, which that's not accurate with what we said our class sides are. So whatever our class sides are, we will set right here. So this will be updated to 7 or to 6 or whatever this value we set for our class is, so we can have one source of truth. All right, so it says in the main function below, and after printing the dice roll, change sides of my first dice to be set to 20. So it wants us to actually change it to 20. Boom. And then let's go ahead and run it. And also, it's going to automatically choose a random number 1 through 20 because, first of all, the sides are going to be 20. And also, it's going to know to choose 1 through the number of sides. So, updating sides will affect two outputs. Can you guess what the two outputs will change to? What will it say when we run the app? It will say what will it say? Sided dice rolled. Of course, this will be random, but it's going to be a lot different. So, all right, when we play that, it says your 20-sided dice rolled 4. So, I wanted a more interesting number. So your 20-sided dice rolled 19, which is different from before because we only had a 6-sided dice. Now we expanded the functionality to be able to go up to 20. Copy and paste the existing print statement below after where you change the number of sides. Replace the printing of dice roll with the result of calling roll method on my first dice. Your program should look like that. So, oh, okay. So, what I did, I actually changed the 6 to the 20 um, inside the actual class, but it wanted us to do it um, inside the main function, which we're going to go ahead and do that here. So pretty much the default value will be 6, but as our program goes on, we're going to say, hey, we don't want a 6-sided. We want a 20-sided. So we go ahead and enforce this change inside our program, which will change our sides variable. And then we're going to go ahead and print that out here with the my my first dice dot roll, which they are calling directly, which this variable is going to be from the 6, and this will be the 20 from the 20. So let's go ahead and play that and see what happens. So your 6-sided dice rolled 2, your 20-sided dice rolled 1. So, alright. Says run your program and you should see a message for the 6-sided dice and a second message for the 20-sided dice. Customize your dice. The idea of a class is to represent a thing, often something physical in the real world. In this case, a dice class does represent a physical dice. In the real world, dice cannot change their number of sides. If you want a different number of sides, you need to get a different dice. Programmatically, this means that instead of changing the sides property of an existing dice object instance, you should create a new dice object instance with the number of sides you need. In this task, you are going to modify the dice class so that you can specify the uh, number of sides when you create a new instance. Change the dice class definition so you can supply the number of sides. This is similar to how a function accepts can accept arguments for input. Modify the dice class definition to accept an integer called numSides. The code inside your class does not change. So we're gonna accept this to set your number of sides on creation when the creation of the instance is executed. So it wants us to add uh, the the variable here, where you'll be able to enter the variable amount here. So this is a variable named numSides of type integer. So inside the dice class, delete the sides variable as you can now use numSides. So also fix the range to use numSize. Your dice class should look like this. So basically, it wants us to go ahead and completely delete this because we're not going to need it anymore. Because when this is passed in, we can just go ahead and use this in our method here, numSides. So we use that here directly from what is passed in when the instance of the class is created. So we'll need to change some things up here, which we haven't done yet. If you okay, so if you run this code, you'll see a lot of errors because you need to update main to work with the changes to dice class. In main, to create my first dice with 6 sides, you must now supply the number of sides as an argument to the dice class as shown below. So, alright, so let's say we want my first dice to be 6. We go back here, and then just like, passing in variables for a function, we can also pass in 6 right here. Oops, I put 56. Go ahead. So we can put 6 right here. And then guess what? That's going to define how many sides our my first dice is going to be. So it's going to be 6 sides. So as the starting value. So what does it want us to do now? In the print statement, change size. We did that. Okay. Oh, in the print statement, change size to numSides. Below, delete the code that changes sides to 20 because that variable does not exist anymore. Delete the print line statement underneath it as well. Your main function should look like the code below, and if you run it, there should be no errors. So, what it wants us to do here is, since we don't want this anymore, or yeah, we don't want this anymore and this anymore. So we set our size to this, and then what we want to print out is this. this first statement here. So you notice that it says dot num size, num sides, because it looks like you can access the variable that you passed in the as a class variable here to display the number of sides, and then the return value of dice roll, which is this method returning the random number here, which will set this variable, which will be displayed there. And now, and I want to say, that's interesting in Kotlin that you don't have to actually define the class variable here. It looks like you can already access the class variable using the dot notation just from this, the perimeter being passed there, which is very interesting. All right, so I hit play, and then it says your six-sided dice rolled 5. So six-sided dice, which is my first dice, and it's and then our random roll function works like usual. And then 8. After printing the first dice roll, add code to create and print a second dice object called my second dice with 20 sides. So we're going to make a brand new dice in addition to the dice we already have. And we're going to say it's my second dice. So now I have 1, 2 dice objects. Add a print statement that rolls and prints the returned value. So we're gonna go ahead and print out what is the return value in our second one. So remember, this class is the blueprint of the behavior of what a dice will behave like. So we don't have to change any code down here in order for this second dice to perform how we expect. So when we hit the play button, it will display here your 6-sided dice rolled 4, your 20-sided dice rolled 16. So great. So remember, these are 2 separate dice. This is our 6-sided dice, and this is our second 20-sided dice that we created. So, all right, and which both follow the blueprint of the class. And so, all right, so in your main, it should look like that, which, yeah, that's essentially what we have. Except they declare this after the print line, which I declare this up here, which is fine. Let me see. So yeah, so this my dice.roll calls the method directly, and this my first dice uses the dice roll variable. I wonder if they will want us to make another variable for the second one. Let's see. Run your finish program and then boom and boom. Perfect. Adopt good coding practices. When writing code, concise is better. You can get rid of the random number variable and return the random number directly. Change the return statement to return the random number directly. So we can shorten the code a bit by going into the roll statement, and then it wants us to go ahead and just use this line to return it. So this shortens the code greatly, and this little line right here becomes a random number generator with just this little line right here in Kotlin, which is part of the advantages of Kotlin is you can be able to execute more powerful stuff with less lines of code. So let's see if that works the same. So I'm going to go ahead and play that. And I'm going to go ahead and go down here and then boom. Yeah, it looks like it's working. Let's go ahead and check if the random number changes again. Boom. Yeah, working as it did before with the shorter line of code there. In the second print statement, you put the call to get the random number into the string template. You can get rid of the dice roll variable by using the same thing in the first print statement. So call my first dice.roll in the string template and delete the dice roll variable. The first two lines of your main code now look like this. So it wants us to go ahead and delete the dice roll variable and call these two directly. So we're going to go ahead and so this is probably just showing you that this is possible for certain cases, but in this case they don't want it, so we're going to delete that. And since we deleted that, we have to change this here dice roll variable, since we deleted that, to what do you guys think it will be? It will be my first dice dot roll, because we want to call our first dice here to print instead of our second dice. Let's see if that was done correctly. Gonna go ahead and run that. And then your 20-sided dice rolled a 6. Your 6-sided dice rolled 6. They both rolled 6. Your 6-sided dice rolled 2. Your 20-sided dice rolled 9. So that looks like the correct behavior there. So that's great. Let me go ahead and actually delete this old code there, which was an example for you guys. I'm going to go ahead and delete it since we don't need that anymore, that comment. And so, perfect. So note, changing code to make it shorter, more efficient, or easier to read and understand is called refactoring. It's like writing a document where you write a first draft that has all the information and then edit and refine your words. This is your final code after refactoring it. So that's always a good programming practice to use shorter and efficient code, and some employers like to see that, where also your fellow employees might do a code review on your code, and they want to see the best practices being performed. They want to see that the code is clean and easy to read, and that you're doing it efficiently. All right, so this is the official solution code for this code lab. And so basically you're gonna travel to this code lab, and you can just pick up this code in the solution code section here, number 8 in this code lab. So I have a link to this code lab, so you can go ahead and hit the link to this code lab, grab the solution code in section 8. Let me also see if I can, let me go ahead and post the solution code in the chat as well, just so that it can be conveniently accessible there too. So let me go ahead and do that. Um, so solution. All right. Well, in the chat, it looks like it's cutting off on my screen, but regardless, you can go ahead and get your solution code from the link that will that I have provided in the chat and also in the description. So, in summary, call the random function on an int range to generate a random number 1 dot 6 dot random, which this is the more efficient way. Classes are like a blueprint of an object. They can have properties and behaviors implemented as variables and functions. An instance of a class represents an object, often a physical object such as a dice. You can call the action on the object and change its attributes. You can supply values to a class when you create an instance. For example, class dice val numsize int, and then create an instance with dice 6. Functions can return something. Specify the data type to be returned in the function definition, and use a return statement in the function body to return something. For example, fun, example, parentheses, colon, int, curly brackets, return 5, ending curly bracket. All right. So, we've been exposed to, functions and classes, and also instances of classes. The class is like the blueprint, the object is like the actual thing. And then I encourage you all to check out these learn more links, such as the vocabulary for Android basics and Kotlin, random number generator, the mind boggling challenge of designing 120-sided dice. That sounds kind of interesting. Then classes in Kotlin, function declarations in Kotlin, returning a value from a function. If you need more study on those different things, I recommend classes in Kotlin. If you need to learn more about classes, classes are like a key cornerstone part of mobile development, also specifically Kotlin with Android development. So, so it says like the mind-boggling challenge of designing 120-sided dice. Okay, so all right, I wanted to open that link just to see what 120-sided dice looks like, and wow, they have such small um, faces on here. So it looks like the more sides you have, the closer it looks like to a round ball instead of like a square. So that's interesting. I just wanted to see what that looks like. And then finally, it says practice on your own. Practices are optional. They provide an opportunity for you to practice what you've learned in this code lab. So give your dice class another attribute of color. So I'm gonna actually uh, leave this as an exercise for you all to do on your own. To go ahead and check out the practice on your own and see if you can complete these two tasks that they tell you to do. And all right, that's actually going to conclude our stream for today. Thank you all for watching. Please subscribe and leave a comment down below. You can ask any question you want regarding this tutorial. Many more videos to come. And always stay coding, guys. And I'll I'll talk to you all later. It's a pleasure to have you here with me. All right.